Hi, church. Have you ever asked a simple question and someone responds with a very, very long answer that seems to have nothing to do with what you asked them? It can be a yes or no question, and what you get is a dissertation. On the face of it, that's what we find in Acts chapter 7. Stephen, our faith-filled, spirit-empowered, table-waiting hero of chapter 6, had been arrested, apparently for performing miracles and preaching persuasively. And he's brought before the Sanhedrin. In a scene reminiscent of Jesus' trial, some false charges were trumped up against him. Luke, the author, tells us they produced false witnesses who testified, "This fellow never stops speaking against this holy place and against the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs Moses handed down to us." All who were sitting in the Sanhedrin looked intently at Stephen, and they saw that his face was like the face of an angel. Then the high priest asked Stephen, "Are these charges true?" One would imagine the answer to that question is yes or no. Instead, Stephen's response is the single longest speech in the entire book of Acts. An honor not given to Peter, the leader of the early church. Not Paul, Luke's traveling companion who was about to take center stage for the remainder of the story. But to Stephen, our waiter. Even the speech itself seems a rather odd response. Compared to Peter's sermons in Acts 2 and 3, this sermon feels like a bit of a snoozer. Perhaps you're like me, you've read this passage and you're wondering, what in the world is this about? To the question, are you blaspheming the temple and the law, Stephen spends roughly 48 verses detailing Jewish history that everyone in the room would have been familiar with. He talks about Abraham, Joseph, Moses, and David. His audience would have been in agreement with almost every point up until the end. But this is the important part. Look at where he focuses their attention. With Abraham, "Brothers and fathers, listen to me. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham while he was still in Mesopotamia before he lived in Haran." With Joseph, because the patriarchs were jealous of Joseph, they sold him as a slave into Egypt. But God was with him. And Moses, after 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames of a burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. To those who are identifying God with the temple in Jerusalem, Stephen was saying, look at God's word. Look at the story of the patriarchs and beyond. God isn't confined to this place. God is bigger than a building. It's why he finishes with, "However, the Most High does not live in houses made by human hands. As a prophet says, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool." Now, Stephen's story is a hinge point in the author Luke's 2-volume work. Now, back in Luke, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verse 51, up until this point in Act 7, the focus has been on Jerusalem. Now, Jewish history itself has a sort of centripetal force, a focus on Jerusalem. But now it's reversed. Now, Luke's focus will mirror the churches. The temple and the church in Jerusalem will retain its importance. But now the focus is outward, not inward. To Rome, to the ends of the earth. And as they go, it's not as if they're leaving God's presence or the holy sanctuary behind. God goes with them. God goes before them. They're not taking God anywhere that he hasn't already been. Wherever they go can be holy land, or at least holy ground. And we'll talk more about mission in the weeks to come as the disciples finally begin to fulfill Acts 1:8. But for now, I just want to encourage you to take some time in your car, in your office, maybe as you unload the dishwasher, to just quiet yourself just for a moment and acknowledge that God is with you. Yes, God filled the temple in Solomon's day. Isaiah saw the train of God's robe fill the temple, but just as much, these are the kinds of places that God shows up. In the midst of the mundane and everyday life, in the wilderness, and amongst those who don't acknowledge him, he speaks to us. He calls to us. May you have such an encounter this week. God bless.